The Dumont Family History by Reginald Dumont. Reg inherited this project from his mother Betty Dumont. She gave Reg her handwritten notes and her dream to make the family history available to her grandchildren. What he thought would be 3 days' work turned into 30 years of research. The earliest records found of the Dumont family begin about 1544. The records are found in the Church of Canchy in France. It is reasonable to assume that the Dumont family has roots extending back additional generations. But it is the absence of records that limits the historical accuracy. In France, record-keeping began in 1539 when King Francis I required the church to record all baptisms, marriages, and burials. The records are handwritten notes made by the priests of their ceremonies. Many have been deciphered and electronically recorded, becoming the basis of today's genealogical research. Enjoy the Dumont family story. Feudalism. The story begins in medieval France during a time of feudalism. The Dumont family were a lineage of seigneurs or lords. Seigneurs are at the lowest rank of nobility. They ruled the land on behalf of the king. With their knights they maintained the political order. The seigneur obliged peasants to work on his land. He required all peasants to grind their grain at his gristmill. The peasants must provide the seigneur with 1 sack of flour for every 14 sacks they ground. He had the right to free labor from each peasant. The seigneur could claim the local natural resources such as fishing, timber, and pastures. The knights reported to the lords and enforced the laws. The seigneur swore allegiance to the king. During the swearing-in ceremony, the seigneur was on his knees to the king's representative. He removed his hat, spurs, and sword. He swore to manage the land and to turn over the taxes to the king. The king compelled the seigneur to raise a militia for defense of the kingdom, to build a manor house, and a gristmill on the land. In exchange, the seigneur would keep a percentage of the taxes. Estates. The feudal system had 3 distinct social classes or estates. The first estate was the king and his immediate heirs to the throne. The second estate were the nobles. The king appointed the nobles. Nobles composed about 1% of the total population of the kingdom. Nobles socialized and married within their social class. The third estate was composed of the merchants, farmers, craftsmen, artists, and all the peasants. Peasants made up about 97% of the third estate. They had no privileges. They worked and paid the taxes. There are very few records of these families.
Bonjour. My name is Simeon Guéret. In Canada, my family is known as Dumont. I am of the 1st generation of the Guéret family. I was born in 1544. I was told that I was baptized at the church in Canchy. I do not have baptism records. I was born into a family of seigneurs. We were French nobles. We lived at the Château Guéret. The château is beside the hamlet of Canchy. We had many people work for us. Today, Château Guéret is a holiday rental home. The current owners call it a sheet. Guests can visit the dairy farm. It is located close to the des beaches. I married Madeleine Froment in 1571. Madeleine was 24 when married. She was born in 1547. I was 27 when married. I died at 36. My wife, Madeleine, died at 53. We were buried at the cemetery of Canchy. Nicolas was the eldest son. Nicolas was born in 1574 and was baptized at Canchy. He inherited the land and the seigneur title. Nicolas became the head of the family for the 2nd generation. Nicolas married Jeanne Le Saunier. They were married in 1599 at Canchy. Jeanne Le Saunier was born in 1576 at Bayeux. She was 23 when they married. I do not know how Nicolas died. He died in 1627 at Mazevaux, in the Alsace region. Nicolas would have been 53. He was killed during the 30 Years' War between France and Germany. His wife Jeanne died in 1646 at Bayeux. Bayeux is 25 kilometers east of Canchy. Nicolas and Jeanne had 5 children. Only 2 of the children lived to adulthood.
Bonjour, I am Françoise de Méhéran du Montmirel. Jacques Guéret was my husband. He was the 3rd generation seigneur at the Guéret Seigneurie. Jean Guéret was baptized in 1605 at Canchy. He was the only male child of his parents to survive to adulthood. Jean and I married during 1634, at Canchy. When we married, Jean was 29. I was 19. I was baptized in 1615, at La Combe, 3 kilometers from Canchy. Jean was killed 5 years after our marriage in 1639. He was killed at Saint-Germain-la-Ville, in the Champagne-Ardenne region. He was only 34. I was a widow at 24 years. I had 3 children. I was alone at the Manor Guéret. My mother begged me to bring her grandchildren to her home. I raised the children at Château Montmirel. Château Montmirel is about 3 kilometers from Manor Guéret. It is luxurious compared to the humble manor of the Guéret family. My father Jean de Méhéran du Montmirel is higher status than the seigneur title of Jean Guéret. My father was a count. The many generations of Méhéran family had the title Montmirel. The Château du Montmirel has medieval origins. Montmirel, Mehan, admirable mountain. Méhéran is my family name. The name comes from the Vikings. The Vikings invaded Normandy. The Méhéran family were advisors to the king. My oldest son, René Guéret, becomes the 4th seigneur of the Guéret seigneury. My son René was baptized in 1636 at Canchy. René married Madeleine Vigoureuse in 1660 at Canchy. Madeleine Vigoureux was from Castilly. She was baptized in 1640. Castilly is 9 kilometers west of Canchy. Madeleine died at 34 years. She was buried at Bayeux. After Madeleine died, I was part of raising my grandchildren at the Château du Montmirel. I was lucky to be with my grandson Jacques Guéret, until he was 12. My father wanted to pass his title to the grandchildren. But my father had passed before they were born. I told my grandchildren that they could call themselves by his title, du Montmirel. My son René died at 54 years. It was in the year 1691, he died at Seine-Maritime. That is about 200 kilometers east of Canchy. He was buried at Bayeux.
Bonjour, my name is Jacques Guéret. I was baptized in 1665 at Canchy in France. I was born into a family of seigneurs. My older brother Noël became the 5th generation seigneur. He inherited everything of my father. When my father died in 1691, I was 25. I knew that I needed to find a new life. I am the first of the Guéret family to leave France and go to Canada. I traveled to La Rochelle, where I boarded a ship to Quebec. I arrived at Beauport. I went to the seigneur of Bourg-du-Fargy. I signed a contract to become an indentured farm laborer for Jacques Tardif and Barbe d'Orange. Here, I met their daughter, Marie-Anne Tardif. She became my wife.
Bonjour. My name is Anne Tardif. I am a daughter of Jacques and Barbe Tardif. Jacques Guéret came to work at my father's farm at Beauport. He worked for my father for 3 years. He became a free man. We were in love. In the year 1694, Jacques became my husband. We were married at Beauport. Before our marriage, I signed a contract to renounce my claim on my father's farm. In exchange, my father gave Jacques and me 3 acres of frontage land. My parents agreed to give us room and board for a year. We were building our house. They also gave us 1 cow, 2 pigs, 1 blanket, a black urn of marmite and a medium pail. Jacques agreed to help with the planting that spring. We were given 60 bushels of wheat for our work. For the first 15 years after we married, we lived on the farm that my father gave us. Soon, this was not enough and for my husband. My husband was very ambitious. Jacques wanted a large farm. We exchanged our small farm in Beauport with my brother Michel to get more land. We had 9 children. 3 were born as triplets.
Family name. When I came to Quebec, I was known by my family name, Guéret. I signed Jacques Guéret. At our marriage, I told the priest that my name was Guéret. I told him that my parents were René and Madeleine from Canchy. People always wanted to know who I was in France. What was my estate and where did I live? It was common in New France to have the family name, plus a second name that gave more information. That was called a dit-nam. Dit meaning what a person called themselves. Years later, I began calling myself Jacques Guéret Dumont Mirel. When people would ask about me, I would use my grandfather's title. The title described both the place I was from and the title of my ancestry. When I said I was from Canchy, nobody knew about that hamlet. People began to shorten the long title from Dumont Mirel to the easier to pronounce Dumont. The priests and others would write Jacques Guéret dit Dumont. Mont Louis. I was so determined to expand my farm that I was not listening to everything that was said. People would say that Mont Louis had farmland available. They said that it was the best location for cod fishing. Mont Louis is about 550 kilometers from Beauport. Mont Louis had been abandoned for 6 years when I went there. During the spring of 1710, I took my 3 eldest sons to Mont Louis. I planned to build a new homestead. We brought just the bare necessities. Tenting was our only shelter. It was not good farmland. The growing season was very short. The land was leached with sea salt. In the spring, and followed with our family. Jean-Baptiste was born in Mont Louis. For 2 years, we worked hard to clear the land. We were forced to abandon Mont Louis. During 1713, I took my family back to Beauport. We went to our homestead which had been leased to Michel Tardif. He is my wife's brother. At Beauport, my son Jean-Baptiste was baptized. 1 month later, our daughter, Marguerite, was born and baptized. We resumed farming in Beauport. But I was looking to expand the farm. Finding new land was becoming difficult. Most of the good farmland was taken. Rivière-du-Loup. In 1716 we sold the farm to my wife's brother Michel. We took the family to Rivière-du-Loup. There I signed a lease for 5 years with Seigneur Blondeau. For the first year, things were going very well. Then Seigneur Blondeau accused me of harvesting hay on his land. The judge ruled in favor of me. But the judge ruled that I had to leave the area at the end of my lease. L'Île Verte, who left the Rivière-du-Loup region and went to l'Île Verte. It was managed by Seigneur Jean-Baptiste Côté. In 1722, I signed a 5-year lease for a small farm. It was 6 acres frontage by 40 feet long. L'Île Verte is not an island. It is on the south shore of the St. Lawrence. The community of l'Île Verte and the island are often confused. Saint-André. In 1727, I signed a concession to a bigger plot of land at Saint-André near Kamouraska. The land has been passed down to the next generations. Today, the land remains the home to the Dumont family.
Saint-André. Bonjour. I am Tardif Guéret. After the lease ended at l'Île Verte, Jacques and I settled in Saint-André. Jacques was in his 60s. My family had changed. Our children were married adults. We had grandchildren. 4 of the children had passed away as young adults. 3 other sons had married and were living in the area. Antoine had moved to Quebec. Our only daughter had married and moved to Kamouraska. When Jacques was 71, we retired from the farm. Jacques and I moved to Kamouraska. There, we were closer to our grandchildren.
Berceau. Bonjour. I am Jacques Guéret. The Kamouraska region could be called the cradle of the Guéret-Dumont family. In French we call it the berceau. It is from the Kamouraska region that all the next generations of the Dumont family originate. Records indicate that 4 generations lived and farmed in Saint-André.
Bonjour, I am Jean-Baptiste Dumont. Jean-Baptiste I was the head of the 6th generation. He was born in 1711 at Mont-Louis, Quebec. He was baptized 2 years later at Beauport. During 1733, Jean-Baptiste married Marie-Madeleine Labourlière at Kamouraska. She was born in 1709 at Rivière-Ouelle, Quebec. They had 10 children. Jean-Baptiste and Madeleine took care of the farm and Jacques and Anne Guéret in their latter years. They inherited the family farm. Jean-Baptiste died at age 44 in 1756. He left Madeleine with 9 children. Madeleine died in 1790 at Kamouraska. They are buried at the cemetery of Saint-Louis at Kamouraska. Generation 7. Jean-Baptiste II was the head of the family for the 7th generation. He was born at 1739 at Kamouraska. Jean-Baptiste II was the 3rd oldest child of his parents. Plains of Abraham. Battle of Quebec at the Plains of Abraham took place in 1759. It was fought on a plateau outside Quebec City. The battle created Canada. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 made Quebec a British colony. There is no documentation to indicate how these fundamental changes affected Jean-Baptiste II's life. He was 20 years at the time of the battle. We do not know if Jean-Baptiste was a part of the hastily assembled French militia. There were 11,000 men recruited to resist the British invasion. The militia had no military training or experience. The militia was deployed along the shores of the St. Lawrence from Rivière-du-Loup to Quebec City. The vast majority were in Beauport and Quebec area. We know that Jean-Baptiste became a British subject after the battle. Jean-Baptiste II married Marie-Louise Michaud. She was born during 1730 at Kamouraska, Quebec. Jean-Baptiste and Marie-Louise were married in 1765 at the Church of Saint-Louis at Kamouraska. Their first child Jean-Baptiste III was born 1 year later. They had 7 children. Jean-Baptiste II died in 1798 at Kamouraska. He was 58 years. Marie-Louise Michaud died at age 72. She died in 1803 at Kamouraska. Jean-Baptiste and Marie-Louise were buried at Saint-Louis Cemetery at Kamouraska. Generation 8. Jean-Baptiste III had the same name as his grandfather and his father. He was born at Saint-André during 1766. He was the eldest son of Jean-Baptiste II and Marie-Louise Marchand. His mother died when he was 12. He had a dream to earn enough money to buy a big farm. The development of the Northwest Company of Montreal was significant for Jean-Baptiste. They paid voyageur a large amount of money to travel. He was a very large man, and his strength was well suited to being a voyageur. Jean-Baptiste joined the Northwest Company in 1788 at the age of 22. He became a voyageur. During the following year, The French Revolution had a significant impact on Quebec, initially sparking enthusiastic support for the ideals of the Revolution. People wanted to throw off the chains of French hierarchy and taxes. They welcomed the end of control by a noble class system. People began to abandon historical connections to nobility, titles and class rule. As the revolution turned to execution by guillotine, opinions shifted. There are no documents in the Guéret Dumont history that link the French Revolution to the family dropping the Guéret name. The members of the family used the Guéret Dumont name prior to the Revolution. After the French Revolution, the family is known as Dumont.
Fur trade. In 1670, the British granted the Hudson's Bay Company a monopoly over the fur trade for all the waters that drain into the Hudson Bay. The area becomes Rupert's Land. The company acts as the government and law for the next 200 years. The land became home to a new people called the Metis. They were participants in the fur trade. They acted as guides, interpreters, and produced pemmican for the traders. They populated the Red River Colony, which became Winnipeg. The Northwest Company of Montreal was the rival company to the Hudson's Bay Company. The Northwest Company relied upon the labor of young voyageurs of Quebec. It was known for the swift movement of its canoes. The Northwest Company expanded to the prairies and was competing with the Hudson's Bay Company. Eventually, the Hudson's Bay Company absorbed Northwest Company. A single one-way trip took 6 to 7 months. The only time the voyageurs could travel was when the rivers and lakes were clear of ice. A canoe weighed about 600 pounds. It took 6 to 8 men to portage the canoe. There were 10 to 14 men per crew. They traveled about 100 miles per day. They paddled for about 2 hours and stopped for a break. The break was the time it took to smoke 1 pipe of tobacco. About 15 minutes. The distance they traveled was measured in pipes. The cargo was wrapped into 80-pound packs that could be lifted onto the back of a voyageur. Each voyageur would carry a pack for a 10-minute portage, stop for a rest, and repeat. From Montreal, a trip would consist of paddling through the Great Lakes to Fort William. Today it is Thunder Bay. This leg took 2 months. From Fort William to Fort Garry was the most difficult. Although the second leg was a shorter distance, it had more than 50 portages. It took another 2 months to get to Fort Garry. There they would buy as much pemmican as their canoes would hold. Pemmican was their sole source of food for the leg across the prairies. The leg to Fort Edmonton was a long distance, but there were few portages. It was easy paddling. By the time they arrived, it was late September or early October. The open water season was ending. They unloaded their cargo at the trading post. It was critical that they prepare for the winter. There were not many days to prepare their shelter, gather fuel, and hunt food. There was no option. They had to stay the winter. During the following year, they would build the trading post and improve their quarters while the trading went on in the post. In the second spring, they began the return voyage. The canoes were heavily loaded with furs. The return voyage took equally as long. They would arrive in Montreal just before the winter freeze. Their life was full of perilous adventure, of grueling work, and cheerful camaraderie. The fur trade was the early Canadian get-rich-quick plan, similar to working in the oil patch today.
My name is Shusette. People called me Shusette Saucy. I was with the Saucy because they took me as a child slave. Some said I came from the Carrier Nation. Others said I was of mixed heritage from Russian and Indian parentage. The Carrier people traded with the Russians. They say I was born about 1774. There were no records. In 1787, when I was 13, I was bought from the Saucy tribe by a voyageur called Bruno. That made me his wife. The next year I had my first child. I named him after his father Jean-Baptiste Bruno. My son was born at Fort Edmonton. In 1789, Bruno sold me to Jean-Baptiste Dumont. I became Dumont's common-law wife. Buying a wife was a common practice of the voyageurs. In the spring of 1790, before Jean-Baptiste left for Quebec, Suzanne Dumont was born near Batoche. She was the first Metis child born to the Dumont family. Jean-Baptiste took me to the Red River colony. This is where the voyageurs would leave their wives and children until the next season. A fur trade season was 2 years. He was 2 years with me and 2 years away in Quebec. Each season he was with me we had one more child. The summer of 1792, Jean-Baptiste Dumont returned. He was going to Fort Edmonton. I joined my husband. During this 2-year season our first son was born. I named him Gabriel Dumont. He was born at Fort Edmonton. By the spring of 1794 it was time for me to take the children to Red River. The next season, that began in 1796, another child was born. His name was Isidore Dumont. He was born in 1798. During the season that began in 1800, Jean-Baptiste Dumont was born. When I was waiting at Red River Colony, Paul Durand took me and claimed me as his wife. He took me to Fort Edmonton. During the season of 1804, Jean-Baptiste came back to Red River Settlement, but I was not waiting for him. He found me at Fort Edmonton. Jean-Baptiste was very angry. He told Durand to give me back to him. They got into a knife fight. I thought Durand was dead when we left. Later that season in 1805 Marie-Cécile Dumont was born. His last voyage began in 1808. That was the last time I saw my husband. Jean-Baptiste Dumont left me at Red River in 1810 and never returned. I raised the children at Red River Colony. All the children adopted the Metis culture. We had 5 children.
Bonjour. My name is Marie-Marguerite Michaud. I'm the wife of Jean-Baptiste Guéret Dumont. I was born at Kamouraska in 1768. In the fall of 1794, after Jean-Baptiste returned from his voyage with the Northwest Company, we were married. I was 26 years. We were married at Kamouraska. The next year, my daughter, Marie-Salomé, was born. Jean-Baptiste was a very ambitious man. He wanted money to buy a farm. In the spring of 1796, the fur trade took my husband away. 2 years would pass before his return. I did not know where he would go. The place names meant nothing to me. In the fall of 1798, Jean-Baptiste returned to Kamouraska. I was starting life again. The following year in August, my second daughter Marie-Thècle was born. In the spring of 1800, he went back to the fur trade. He returned 2 years later in 1802. My life started another cycle. The next year, I had my first son. We named him Jean-Baptiste François. At the spring of the year 1804, my second son Flavien was born. He was born in May. 2 years later in 1806, Jean-Baptiste returned, and we resumed life. By the spring of 1808, my husband departed for the West. After he was gone, my third son, Stanislas, was born. My husband never saw him. Stanislas died after 2 months. In the fall of 1810 Jean-Baptiste came back from some place called Rocky Mountain House. He said he was a guide for David Thompson. I did not know that man. We had enough money to buy a very good farm at Saint-André. Jean-Baptiste did not go on the fur trails again. He stayed at Saint-André, and we became famous. I lived 75 years. I died in 1843. My husband died 6 years later in 1849. We were buried at the cemetery of Saint-André, in Kamouraska.
Canchy, my name is Gabriel Dumont. People called me Lacaste. I never knew the meaning of that name. I think it meant that I was a leader of the community because I led the buffalo hunt. I could speak 6 languages: French, English, Blackfoot, Cree, Assiniboine and Dakota. I am the first son of Jean-Baptiste Dumont and Josette Sarcy. I was born in 1793 at Fort Edmonton. I did not like politics. I was not involved in the real rebellion. I had passed away 5 years prior to the rebellion. I am a very big man. Many said I was a giant. I was over 6 feet tall and very strong. I led the buffalo hunt. I never lost a fight to any man. They feared me. My brothers lived at Red River and were involved in politics. Isidore led the peace negotiations with the Dakota. He was part of the Red River Rebellion and the Battle of Batoche. He died at the Battle of Batoche. I am often confused with my young nephew Gabriel. He is the son of my brother Isidore and was born in 1837 at the Red River settlement. Young Gabriel is famous for leading the Batoche Rebellion and the Wild West Show. My youngest brother, Jean-Baptiste, was one of the leaders selected to represent the Pembina Métis community in treaty negotiations. Jean-Baptiste fought at Red River Rebellion. He was not at the battle at Batoche because he died 1 year earlier. In 1814, when I was 21 years, Lord Selkirk stopped the production of pemmican at the Red River colony. He banned hunting bison from horseback. That was our way of life. We lived from the buffalo hunt. We produced pemmican for the Northwest Company. It was the food for the voyageur. It was dried buffalo meat, fat and Saskatoon berries. I saw the number of buffalo decline, and the ban on pemmican. I knew it was time to leave Red River. About 1820, I went to Fort Edmonton and then to Lac Sainte-Anne. The Hudson's Bay said that during 1823, at Fort Edmonton, I was drinking rum with others. A hunter named Megan started a fight. I killed him. The Hudson's Bay Company ignored the incident. I guided Father Thibault to Lac Sainte-Anne. He was an oblate missionary. I helped him build the mission. I liked Father Thibault. He convinced me to renounce my common-law marriage. Suzanne Lucier and I had been together for 18 years. We had 6 children. In 1842, we went to the mission. There Father Thibault baptized myself and all my family. Later that same day, Father Thibault performed the Christian marriage at the mission at Lac Sainte-Anne. Suzanne and I were married in a church. I was the leader of the Lac Sainte-Anne Métis community. If a company asked for a guide or an interpreter, they had to get my permission. The Palisades group wanted guides to the Rocky Mountains. I had been to the Rocky Mountain foothills, Cronest Pass, and the head of the Fraser River near Mont Robson. I finally agreed to take them. The smallpox epidemic of 1870 hit my family very hard. By the end of the epidemic, we lost 5 of our 10 children, 4 of 9 in-laws, and 18 of the 31 grandchildren. Most of the deaths in my family occurred during October of 1870. We were hit harder by the epidemic than most of the surrounding communities. We had to leave Lac Sainte-Anne to escape the disease. I told my son to find us a new place at the Battle River Valley. Susan died at Lac Sainte-Anne in 1873. She was buried there. She was 67 years. I died 7 years later, at Battle River. I was 7 years.
Canchy, Generation 10. My name is François Dumont. I was born in 1825 at Fort Edmonton. I married Nancy and Gladu at Lac Sainte-Anne in the year 1849. She was 16, and I was 24. We had 10 children. The smallpox epidemic killed 3 children. 3 others died as small children. Only 4 lived to become adults. To avoid the smallpox epidemic, my father, Gabriel, told me to lead a small party of men to find a new home in the Battle River area. This is where the hunters would shelter from the winter. We established our new home away from the trading posts and the disease. I was the founder of the Laboucan settlement. Later, it was known as the Duhamel settlement. The government made me the agent for paying treaty money at Obama. I settled my family on river lot number 46. The small area of the homestead was called Dried Meat Lake. The river lot was rich with spruce trees for building and white mud for filling the cracks between the timbers. Fuel wood was plentiful, and there were many natural meadows for pastures. There were many Saskatoons. The river and lakes had a good supply of fish. Buffalo were scarce, but moose, deer, elk, and ducks were plentiful. During the winter, I continued trapping and hunting. In the spring I would take the force to Winnipeg. Then return with supplies needed to maintain the family on the farm. I brought back the first plow and the first team of oxen to Dried Meat Lake. About 1881, I was asked to go to St. Albert to request a priest be sent to Dried Meat Lake. I found a young priest from France. His name was Father Bulver. He agreed to come to Duhamel. We built a church for him. It was built with spruce and 4 logs from my lot. My lot provided the white mud for filling the cracks between the logs. In 1890 the settlement was renamed to Duhamel. It was Bishop Duhamel who provided the St. Thomas Church with its bell. Nancy Ann and I lived at Dried Meat Lake near Duhamel. I died at age 80 in 1906. She died at age 91 in 1925. We are both buried at the St. Thomas Cemetery at Duhamel.
This is Generation 11. Bonjour. I am Théotise Deschenaux. My husband is Pascal Dumont. I was 16 years when we married. My husband Pascal was 21 years. We were married at St. Thomas Church at Duhamel. We had 16 children. I was from the Metis colony at Saint Norbert, Manitoba. Saint Norbert was a fort trade post. During the Red River Rebellion, Louis Riel had defensive barricades built at Saint Norbert. That was to stop MacDougall and his troops from entering the colony. My family was at the barricade. My parents were Pierre Deschenaux and Joseph de Courchaine. The Courchaine family was Metis from Saint Norbert. The Deschenaux family is French. They came from Quebec but originated in Normandy, France. They called themselves Creviers dit Deschenaux. In Canada, they were 4 trade workers. My husband, Pascal Dumont, was born in the year 1864 at the Metis colony at Lac Sainte-Anne. When he was 6 years, smallpox killed half of his family. When he was 8, he went with his father to Battle River to find a new home. At 12 years, he helped his father build a new home at Dried Meat Lake. Pascal and I started a new homestead near Dried Meat Lake. We had the northeast quarter of Section 2. On the farm he raised cattle and horses. There was no school. Pascal donated a corner of his homestead for the school. Dried Meat Lake School was built in 1902. Pascal hunted in the area close to Drumele. Pascal was well known for his hunting and excellent marksmanship. At first, Pascal took the force to Fort Garry by ox cart. He traded for flour, sugar, tea, spices and many other things we needed. Later, when the railway came, Pascal and his older sons drove the cattle to Camrose. I died in 1921 at age 51. Pascal died at Camrose during the year 1941. At the time of his death, our youngest son, Thomas and his wife Betty were looking after Pascal and living at the farm. Pascal and I are buried at St. Thomas Cemetery at Douamel.
This is Generation 12. Hello. I am Thomas Alphonse Dumont. Please call me Tommy. I was the youngest child of Pascal and Théotise Dumont. I was born in 1913 at Dried Meat Lake. My mother died when I was 8 years. I was one of 5 children left at home with my father Pascal. John and I were raised by the mother of my best friend Harold Hewitt. I called her Ma Hewitt. I was speaking French to my father and older brothers, then English at school, and to the Hewitt family. My older brother Ted and his wife Eliza had taken over the farm. They took care for my sisters, and for John and I when we came home. I played pond hockey. At New Norway I played baseball on a team called the Whizbangs. I met Betty Cook at a dance in Camrose. We were married in 1939. I served during the Second World War with the Canadian Navy. At the end of the war, Betty and I went back to farming for about 2 years. After the farm sold, I became a journeyman carpenter. The first job I had was building grain elevators. I hated working on high heights. Later I became a specialist in my trade, and became a finishing carpenter. As a finishing carpenter, I could work indoors during the cold winter days when many other workers were laid off. I played softball with the Beverly Jesters. At the local rink I played broomball. I started a curling league called the Lincoln Ramblers. We played on Sundays. I once skipped a team that scored an 8-ender. During the summer I played horseshoes with the neighbors. We would play in the long summer evenings until the sun went down. There was poker on Friday nights. I loved to hunt and fish. We had 5 children, Elaine, Reg, John, Jerry, and Shelley. As the children left home, Betty and I started curling in Beverly and with the Foresters Club. I recruited many of our friends and neighbors to curl. We went to bonspiels and won a few prizes. When I was getting ready to retire, I was diagnosed with cancer. The treatments left me very sick. I died from cancer in July of 1979. Betty died during 2008. It was a few days short of her 89th birthday. I was cremated. We are both buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Edmonton.
Generation 13 are the 5 children of Thomas and Betty Dumont. These children are adults with their own families. Some have left the prairies and gone in different directions, but the bond of family remains. Generation 14 are the grandchildren that Betty Dumont referred to at the outset. Today, they are at the age where some of them have children of their own. These children are the 15th generation and the great-grandchildren of Betty Dumont. A complete family story should include Betty Dumont's side of the family. This story would follow the Cook family story from England to Canada. It could become the subject of another family story. The Dumont family history concludes at this point. It will be up to others to track and record future developments of the Dumont family. I hope you have enjoyed the Dumont story. Reginald Dumont.